Ah, well, hi there. That didn't take you particularly long. So is that a decision or further questions? Questions. Well, fire ahead, I suppose. How do I sleep at night? Well, when you don't interrupt, kind of like this. Well, it's a facetious answer for... What do you think I'm gonna say? Okay, let's do this then. You ever seen The Third Man? Film. Another part in the film, these two guys up in the Ferris wheel. And one of them asked the other, if I gave you $20,000 for each one of those dots that stopped moving, would you really tell me to keep my money in my pocket? Or would you calculate how many dots you can afford to spend? Now, when a dot stops moving, for me, there's a bit of a difference. There's a lot of difference, actually. For one, $20,000 is the cost of the equipment. For two, mine aren't dots. So you think about the dots from the Ferris wheel. It's used to portray insignificance, to portray a feeling of detachment from that person, from that life, from the act of the dot no longer moving. And the reality, as so eloquently portrayed in the film, is that dots stop moving every day. You can't care about all of them. It's not within the capacity of a human being to do so. All those theories that we can only really have 100 people or so that we really know, and so anyone from outside that circle, well, outside of parasocial relationships, they die. Now, of course, the impact of certain people dying, well, that will have an effect on your life. Whether it be a favorite musician who's no longer making music, whether it be a filmmaker no longer making films, whether it be a motivational figure, whether it be a politician, or whether it be someone, a shadow, a hand behind the curtain, being cut off and replaced. The reason I asked you who you voted for isn't because, no offense, I had any interest in your answer. It's just amusing to me that, well, the people vote. If they knew what I knew. The extent to which your vote doesn't matter. You think you choose who's going to be put in these positions? Do you really? Democracy, in theory, oh, what a wonderful, joyous thing. In the reality of the world, the kings were made by kingmakers. The power was held not by the crown, but by those standing behind the chair. And absolutely nothing has changed. Now, the interesting thing about kings is kings could go haywire. They could go off script. And it could actually be very hard to move them. So what a wonderful thing for those behind the curtain to be able to move the person to be able to get rid of them just as they get too much of an idea of how to try to usurp the structures that are put into place for them. They're put into place before them and will exist long after them. As soon as they start getting too cute, well, that's when they start to get taken down. Now, in some cases, that is purely political sabotage. But in some cases, the fun thing about what I do is I am purely an agent of someone else's will. Now, one of my famous traits in the industry is that I will only take on an offer if I am happy to see the result. So for me, it's not dots. For me, it's termites. For me, it's the chance to play God. To decide who we're better off without. And your reaction may well be, well, it's the people behind the curtain. Except the people behind the curtain have done more for society, have done more for the average person, have done more, believe it or not, to temper greed, to put the populace, well, maybe I wouldn't quite go as far as first, but in the top 5, which I promise you is a lot better than any of these political types who get very far would ever do. Quite simply because, for the most part, the political types who get far are the ones who will cut deals, are the ones who will bargain and find one route or another. Those of principle, those of true principle, never get very far. The irony is, I'm far more principled than any politician you've ever known. Whether you approve or disapprove of how I put that principle into place. So I'll sum up a couple of things. Firstly, when I'm asked to make a dot disappear, it is not my will. I'm not a murderer. I'm a gun. The intent was not formed on my part. I'm a tool. A weapon to be used, highly specialized, highly sought after piece of equipment. But, that being said, there are still times where I have not accepted the will behind the idea, where I have believed that one person or another at least deserved to play the game longer. One amusing story that, well, by its nature almost nobody knows, is politics again. A certain candidate who some did not want to see succeed, who put a very different face on the position. And that candidate was, well, asked to be scared away, which is another thing worth noting. A surprising amount of what I do is not really the final option. More an assurance that no matter what security force in the world surrounds you, the final option could always be exercised. Were you to step out of line. And it's not a threat, understand. It's simply a reality made clear. But I digress. This particular candidate was something of a charity case of mine. For I decided I'd rather like to see this particular candidate and a certain set of contractors get along. So instead of playing offense, of pushing them out, I did the opposite. I declined the contract, and I quite simply promised that any attempts on this individual would be met by me and some of my associates, and that we had made so much money off of the contracts we had been given that we were willing to do this one for free. Well, all of a sudden, there's a new idea in the heads of certain people that the best in the world at what we do might one day think, while we will not be stupid enough to upset things entirely, we may still have our own form of conscience. So when you ask me how I sleep at night, it's quite simple. I don't do this unless I know that doing it is better than not doing it. That the events that would unfold if certain people were left to run amok would be so catastrophically bad for the people who are just trying to get on with their lives and not grab at power. Funny how the will of the people ends up being served best by those they will never know and cannot truly be allowed to know. Or at least, not in the news, not in their day-to-day lives. Some may suspect people like me exist. Most will know that it's something they don't really want to know about, despite other silly little television shows. We are all subject to our own folly in some ways. You may claim in your head that I can see the cogs turning, to see problems, to see issues in how I think. And yet I'll point a few things out to you. First, that you're lying here right next to me. Second, that you have done nothing apart from get closer to me since I started talking. And third, that we both know how this is going to end. Maybe not the whole relationship, but this evening, we both know exactly how this is going to end. And, well, what can I say? There is forever a conflict in people's heads of morality. Most people really chase morals that make them feel like they're doing good and refuse to look at whether they're actually doing good. Whether you want to admit it or not, I've done more good for this world than anyone else you've ever met. And that's not a brag, it's a reality. It's a guarantee that the careful ways I've let myself be a part of shaping this world have been in aid of avoiding a parallel universe that is far, far worse. One man can only do so much in this war. But the events of tonight, well, let's just say that this was a good step forward, whether people realize it or not. And anyway, whether people realize it or not, here's another thing people, specifically you, may not realize. Or maybe you realize and just wish you didn't. For all your previous thoughts of morality swirl in your head and rally against what's happening in your life right now, the simple reality is there's nothing you want more than me. And that scares you, doesn't it? Well, it doesn't have to. In some way, this is a whole new world, I'm sure. But why don't you walk this path with me, or better yet, why don't you take this ride with me? And let's see how you get on.